in a borough, which was a direct follow-up from our comp plan. That was one of the things that the residents kind of, what's the best word, told us that they care about, was historic preservation in the borough. So having these old, nostalgic buildings, we definitely want to be sure that we preserve them and keep them for future generations to also enjoy.
Yeah, I should say our conversation today presented by Marcus and Mack, voted Best Law Firm and Best Personal Injury Lawyer 3 years in a row on the Best of Indiana County contest. Visit them online at marcusandmack.com. So, Eden, when we think about that and then we walk up and down Philadelphia Street, we see the buildings, but we see them all over town. It really is a historic town, isn't it?
It really is, and that's one thing that we, I've been gathering and talking to people. We were just having some conversation with local business owners last week, and that's something that we really feel is the fabric of our community, and we want to preserve, but then find ways to kind of bring new life to them so that we can continue to, as Trajan said, enjoy them and preserve them for the future generations.
Yeah.
Tell you what, you can grab that microphone and pull that a little closer to you. There we go. There you go. So what's the upshot of it all? How are we manifesting?
So that's kind of what we're working on now. So what the purpose of this and our public meeting, which will be on November 7th, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, is to get ahead of the residents in terms of historic preservation. So a lot of times when people hear that, alarm bells start going off. They think they're going to be limited in what they can do with their property in terms of redevelopment or even just minor aesthetic changes. That's not necessarily what we're looking to do here. Any type of design guidelines or criteria that would make a building be considered historic, we want it to be a cooperational effort between our department and then also the residents. So they would have as much of a hand in creating those standards and that criteria as we would.
So how will the meeting be set up? How are you going to do that?
Well, the main purpose of the meeting specifically is to identify buildings. So we can't really do anything unless we know where they're at. So the Cultural Resource Survey, which was done by what's their company called? I think it's Practical Preservation. Yeah, they're out of West Virginia. They did a similar thing down in Greensburg, which is why we wanted to use them. So they went out, they identified a lot of the buildings, but the purpose of bringing the residents in is we want to hear the stories. We want to hear, oh, I used to do so-and-so in this building, or I used to enjoy this building for this purpose, whatever it may be. We want to hear those stories because that adds a little bit of, I guess, togetherness, a little bit of purpose or nostalgia to what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Well, the look of a building can change, but the historic. I think of the Indiana Theater, and there it is celebrating 100 years.
Yeah.
And it has changed in its appearance on the inside a lot. On the outside, it still looks like 1924, doesn't it?
Right, and that's what we're looking for. I mean, you can really change the aesthetic of the building, but we're looking to maintain the foundation or the original structure, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've had a couple of, minor changes or people that came in to get permitted for minor changes. And it does, like I said, ring that bell originally, like, oh, can we do this? Will it, affect the historic value of the property? And a lot of times it doesn't. And what we're trying to do long term is create a nationally recognized historic district in Indiana Borough.
Yeah.
And when you're looking at that or the administration of that, those people aren't coming out, investigating the building, seeing what people are doing. Typically, once you have that status as a historic district, that's pretty much solidified.
Yeah. Eden, there are a lot of towns that are very, very restrictive as to what you can do with the building. There are towns that are pretty flexible. I know that finding that right balance is going to be the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we're inviting, the community to come to the meeting next week. We want to hear kind of like what you want to see in these buildings, or we want to hear the ideas. I mean, obviously not everyone will be taking over a building, right? But if you are, like, what is it that you want to see in the community? And then how can we preserve that building too? And I think that's the key thing here. We're really looking to preserve, but that doesn't mean that we're not willing to change, right? So that's kind of what we hope to address next week in our meeting.
Yeah. Trajan, are we thinking of forming a commission of some sort?
It is, yeah. So originally, a couple of years ago, we had the HARB, which is the Historical Architectural Review Board. And that's comprised of residents, of architects, planners, all different sorts of people that come together and would then be the ones administrating the whatever guidelines or design standards that we come up with the community. But yeah, we'd definitely be looking to reform that on the back end of all this.
Yeah. So, and it would be a panel of what size?
I
Still
believe
haven't-
in the past it was a rather large commission, maybe like 15 to 20 people. Right now, I'm not sure, what size it'll be in the future or how that's going to work. That'll play off of, interest of who wants to even be a part of it, who's qualified to be a part of it. So like I said, that's still a little bit off, but yeah, that's definitely something that we're going to be putting back together.
Yeah, and even when we think about it, there are folks that remember what the buildings were originally used for, how the buildings used to look, and of course the structural integrity of the buildings comes into play too, does it not?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think one that we talk about a lot is like the courthouse, right? Like the courthouse still looks like the courthouse, but it's not the courthouse anymore, right? So, we want people to kind of keep that in mind. We want it to look historic. We want to have that historic designation downtown and keep those things that are important to the people who remember it. But we want to find new ways to kind of breathe life into those spaces too.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's worth mentioning, like we said, this is really a conversation that's already going on. There's a Historic Indiana Facebook page, which is run by Dr. Kevin Patrick, our president of the Planning Commission, who also is just really interested, does a lot with historical preservation. But that has over 5,000 followers, and it's specific to, Indiana County, but a lot of it also is specific to Indiana Borough. So like I said, these are conversations that are already taking place. We're just trying to give a platform for people that want to discuss these things.
I remember when Brian Jones took over the building that now houses the Artist Hand. That was a building that I don't think anybody realized was in as bad a shape as it was. That building was almost down. It was in danger of falling down.
Right.
So it took a lot of work to get that back into being a viable building, but then B, turning it into the wonderful place that it is.
Right, and that's what it is. When you mentioned it, is once it gets to a certain point where it's gone, it's gone. Historic stuff like that, you can't get it back. The value that it has, we want people to be aware of that or be thinking about that, keeping it on the top of their mind, because like I said, when it's gone, and there's no getting it back.
Yeah. You look at some of the facades of our town in downtown Indiana, especially when it looks so nice when you're driving through. When you go down the alleys or avenues or the streets, you see that the bones of the building and the frame of the building, they have a lot of great character too, don't they?
Right.
Absolutely.
And that is important to mention too. We're not just looking at the downtown core. We're also looking at the residential areas surrounding it as well. So when you're thinking about that, we're looking at architectural styles of the houses. Some of them have little things, like I know one, I believe, has some sort of glass window that has some sort of historical value, but it's little things like that. And it's not just the big buildings like the courthouse, the theater. It can also be as small as somebody's residence. So that's why it's so important to make sure that the community is aware of these things and they understand what we're trying to get to.
Yeah, I mean, you go out North 9th here
Right.
and take a look at those buildings, take a ride up Vinegar Hill and see some of those historic structures and that particular end of town, which has a whole different character than the other end of town,
Right.
the other side of Philadelphia Street into the south. They all have their different, I don't think quirks is the word, but certainly characteristics
Right.
that all come together to form a pretty neat little enterprise. So the meeting is when?
The meeting is going to be on November 7th from 6 to 7:30, and it's going to be hosted at the Historical and Genealogical Society of Indiana County, and that's at 621 Wayne Avenue.
Yeah, speaking of historic buildings.
Right,
huh?
yeah, we kind of thought that would be a pretty good spot for this.
Let's find one. We're not going to put up a tent for this thing. We've got the historic buildings,
Right.
and the Clark House is right there, and that makes perfect sense.
Definitely.
Anybody can come?
Yep, anybody can come. It's open to everybody. No admission. It's free. We may have hopefully we'll have some refreshments available, so we definitely want as many people to come out as are available.
Yeah, say that date again.
Yep, November 7th from 6 to 7:30.
All right, beautiful. What else do we need to know about any of this?
Those are all the big points.
Yeah, that's the big things. And I think really the alternative goal to this is to, again, just remind people that the borough is trying to be more public facing. So we're trying to break down some of the barriers between us and the public so that we can continue to utilize the public's local knowledge and local information to come up with better plans and better ways to serve the community.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of people here, and we're all concerned about,
Right.
how the town looks, but more importantly, making it into the community that we always want it to be, and preserving a bit of the past while looking forward to the future too.
Right. And to that degree as well, if you're not able to make it to the meeting, we still want, to hear your stories. We still want to get your input. So feel free to reach out to us either in person by coming up to the office. We have multiple social medias. We have Instagram, Facebook, and then you can also just reach out to the planning department, directly. And we would love to, like I said, hear your input and feedback, even if you're not able to make it to that meeting.
Yeah, and this was a kind of a good segue too. We'll be starting up a Coffee with Comms. So now I've been on the radio twice, and hopefully a lot of people have heard about us. But I will be rotating around some of the coffee shops throughout the borough on selected Fridays here moving forward, so that you can come talk to me, get a little bit more background on what we're doing, and just offer some input. Not at a meeting, but obviously come to our meetings as well.
Little informal.
Yeah, exactly.
Informal time with Eden. I like it.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, that's terrific. All right. Hey, thanks both for coming in.
Thank you for having us.
We appreciate that. Get in touch anytime you want to come back and visit with us a little bit more.
Yep.
It's the voice of Indiana County. It's WCCS 101.1 FM, AM 1160, and WCCSradio.com.